Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing incredibly well. I'm doing fabulous, thank you very much, and I'm so thrilled you've joined me for another great story, because nothing beats a great story. I always say that, and I live by that. But before we continue with the story, if you haven't heard part 1, I do strongly recommend you go back to it because you want to not miss out on all the phenomenal details. So before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's continue with part 2 of our story. In the days and weeks that followed, I'm so glad to say that slowly and surely Dustin begins to regain his health. In the very beginning, he almost lived on all my smoothies. Let's not kid. It was a long, daunting, harrowing process for his body to heal, as after becoming a dartboard for half a dozen bullet wounds in his chest, it would take a long while for his body to finally regenerate, but regenerate it did. So often it takes one bullet wound to kill, but often there are cases where several bullets miss a major artery or organ, and the patient pulls through. And for Dustin, this was his fortunate story. I believe it was simply not his time to go, as he had work to do on his earthly journey. I could see the rosy glimmer of pink colour finally returning to his cheeks, a sparkle in his eyes that was complemented by his great sense of humour. I don't think I've ever laughed so much in all my life as I did with Dustin. The man was a complete comic. We would play Scrabble and Monopoly together, listen to music, watch movies. I even read to him stories from books I was reading, and he would listen in earnest, sometimes falling fast asleep like a little child to the sound of my voice. He needed sleep. It aided his recovery. Furthermore, my enthusiastic golden retriever Ernest and my slumber lazy cat Muffin, they seemed to just love Dustin to pieces, as if he was now a permanent fixture and fitting in our cabin. For them he had earned their seal of approval, and let me tell you, Ernest was a judicious judge of character at the best of times. Then there was me, and I hasten to say that despite my very best efforts to want the stranger gone from my life, I began to secretly enjoy having him around, and he in turn seemed to appreciate my rather unconventional lifestyle, living off-grid, far from anything. It was almost as if my idiosyncratic way of life had struck a deep chord with him, resonating with his soul. Dustin had openly marvelled at the bald eagles, hanging out on the patio with both Muffin and Ernest on most days of the week. "I've never seen anything like it in all my life. I could swear to you, those two bald eagles are emotionally attached to your pets. They've genuinely got a good friendship going on here. It's so enchanting to watch. If I was feeling stronger, I'd take hundreds of good photographs of this. I'm quite a dab hand with a camera, you know." I think it's marvellous too. It's very special, you know. You see, idiosyncratic relationships with animals here in the remote wilderness are so special. Life can invite curious relationships to develop between animals that you'd never expect. Believe it or not, those eagles like having friends as much as we do, I say. "You do surprise me, Eve. Saying that, I mean. I get the distinct impression you're very self-sufficient. I don't get the feeling that you have any friends, or want any either. You strike me as a lone wolf, which is strange because you've got such an engaging personality. You're hell of a fun to be around, a good laugh. But I think you're oblivious to your sparkle." I flush. "Thanks, that's very kind of you to say." I find myself feeling quite unusually flattered by the unexpected compliment. "I'm not sure why I'm so solitary," I say. "I'm not running away from anything, if that's what you think. A lot of people naturally think that when you're living the solo life, that's exactly what you're doing. But they couldn't be more wrong. In my case, that is. In truth, I think a lot of people who are running away from society do come here to the Alaskan wilderness to embrace the solitude, to escape the frenzied busyness and chaos of urban life. But that's not me." "What are you then, Eve? he asks me, looking at me with a grin, the light of his blue eyes staring into mine, with a glint of amusement. I'm not sure. I don't actually understand myself. I wish I did. Even I think I'm a conundrum. I guess I just like being close to nature. I have nothing against people, but I enjoy being in my own company. I enjoy the solitude and tranquility here. I find if I'm with people for too long, I begin to feel claustrophobic. It's stifling, almost as if I can't breathe. It can be overwhelming at times. I don't get how some people spend all their time on social media platforms. That would bore me rigid, to be connected to those sites all the time. I expect they wouldn't understand me, as much as I cannot understand them. But hey, there's nothing wrong with being eccentric. It's a free world, you know. Suffice to say, animals never ever make me feel suffocated like that. Maybe with humans you've always got to interact somehow, be socially engaging, effervescent to an extent, and sometimes you just don't feel like talking. Sometimes you don't feel like saying a damn thing, do you? But with animals you can be yourself. You can be quiet. You never have to stand on ceremony and make small, shallow, insincere talk just for the hell of it. I like to exist with nature like a tree in the woodgrove, without having to explain myself to anyone. Jason told me you were like that. He said he could never figure you out. But I think I get you, Eve. Jason spent the whole year we were together, playing happy families, making a whole lot of fun of me. I think he was chuffed to bits having a sister to tease relentlessly. He loved every minute of ruffling my feathers and getting a reaction from me. Thank God he was only my stepbrother for a year. I don't think I could have hacked him for much more than that. He's a really good sort, Eve, really. He liked you a lot, believe it or not. He thought you were a very special person. He was only trying to lighten things up with you. He said you were so deadly serious about everything, and that you would always retreat into the shadows at all kinds of social engagements, not to be seen anywhere. He told me he pulled a sequel of jovial stunts on you, to bring you out of yourself, to get some kind of reaction from you. He loved getting a reaction from you. If you had remained indifferent and nonchalant, he'd have got bored stiff. But the impact of his tricks on you thrilled him so much. You gave him exactly what he wanted, with your indignant screams and protests, and you succeeded in egging him on to play more tricks on you. He couldn't help himself. Your stupendous reactions were classic. Well, he got a reaction from me, didn't he? I wanted to get as far away from him as I possibly could. He drove me away from him, rather than made a friend out of me, least of all a sister. Don't you want a family, Eve, to settle down one day, get married? Says Justin, looking at me seriously. You're a very attractive woman, with so much to bring to the table. Who makes the most legendary gnocchi, which you weren't kidding about either. I'd marry you for your gnocchi alone. And I'm not kidding. Then there are the paintings you do to sell tourists. They're absolutely stunning. I'm very impressed by the standard of your work. You're a natural talent with a unique style all of your own. I love the pictures you did of your animals and the bald eagles together on the patio. Those were excellent. Not to mention the mountain views and the flowery meadows that you've captured in your work. It's breathtaking. You do have a unique style. Those pictures, I have to admit, are very popular. I thoroughly enjoy painting them. No, I haven't actually thought about marriage or kids. I enjoy living my life solo. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm all right with both. I have no hard or fast rules about my life. I just live one day at a time, and I watch what the tide brings in every day. Even living out here in the middle of nowhere, life can surprise you. Things happen, you know. You're a funny one, Eve, laughs Dustin. How can you ever expect to get married one day and have children when you bury yourself away here in your cabin? If you have a precious piece of jewellery that you never ever wear, no one is ever going to know you own such a treasure, and not showing off your asset would be such a waste. A very big shame, if you ask me. I bet you've never joined a dating site a day in your life.
Am I right or am I right? There are men out there that are missing out on a prize jewel, let me tell you.
You're right, I flush. I mean, I've never been on a dating site. Never been on Facebook, social media, Twitter, stuff like that. It really does not float my boat. It doesn't interest me in the slightest. If I was to communicate with someone, I'd far rather get a letter, any day of the week, over an SMS from someone on my telephone. Me and my mother are always writing to each other for that reason. I love receiving her letters. She's an excellent writer. There's nothing like a good letter, let me tell you that. Dustin's account. Nobody tells you what it's like to survive several gunshot wounds. Let's just say there were days when the pain was so insufferable, so unbearable, that I almost wish I hadn't survived. That's how bad it was. Nobody tells you how dreadful pain is. The shooting was not so painful itself. It was almost like a dull burning ache that pierced through my body again and again, as if someone was punching me violently hard. I think my chest was filled with 6 bullets, but miraculously the shooter inadvertently avoided the main organs, and one bullet just grazed my heart. So in the grand scheme of things, I had a lucky, miraculous escape. It was the pain that was after the accident that was the most lamentable. Of course, I knew why I'd been shot. It goes with the territory of being an undercover officer. It's a risk you take in the job. But it was a risk I was prepared to take, in order to bring down some heavy weights, well, the drug dealers that are involved in smuggling large quantities of drugs into Alaska. Let's just say these men are not good people. The kind of treacherous, devious types that are dictated by greed, money, wealth, power. And the value of human life means absolutely nothing to them. If you get on their wrong side and dare to betray them, they will kill you mercilessly, without even so much as batting an eyelid. And usually they will get away with their Machiavellian, insidious crimes. When you betray them, they're likely to make you suffer, chopping off hands and fingers, ears, private parts, even heads. They operate on a code of fear, so you won't dare double-cross them, so they cannot afford to have a chink in their armour, or seem to be soft in any way. They rule using blackmail and threats to dominate their people, and they succeed in their endeavours. I wouldn't mind betting some mysterious disappearance in Alaska could actually be attributed to artfully cunning men like these, who get away with their crimes, as Alaska is so large. You could hide a deceased corpse here anywhere you like, and your crime would possibly remain clandestinely hidden for centuries. Let's just say my close call with death happened very fast. I was fast asleep in my apartment in Fairbanks, Alaska. Fairbanks is the North Star borough. It is the largest, coldest city in the interior of Alaska, known for its northern lights or aurora borealis, where the midnight sun, the sunsets and sunrises, last forever. Hence it is known as the Golden Heart of Alaska. I was asleep in a cosy warm bed at the time. The next thing I know is a man wearing a black ski mask over his face is hovering over my bed, firing into my chest several times. I believe he was second in command of the drug dealer I took down. Furious that the big guy was now incarcerated and locked away in prison for a very long time. So he wanted to extract a lethal form of vengeance on me, to get his ultimate revenge. He would have liked to have cut out my tongue first and gouged out both of my eyes, but he knew his crime needed to be committed very quickly, so he wasted no time in ensuring that I was dead. But I wasn't. Needless to say, the police had tried to locate his whereabouts, as they knew who this perpetrator was that had attempted to kill me, who was now at large and could be anywhere, and it's not exactly difficult to hide in Alaska. He was a dangerous, evil man called Abe's Falconer, but he had slipped through their fingers like butter. By all accounts, while he was out there, my life was still in danger, as it was a dead cert that Abe's would stop at nothing to finish what he'd started, and this time he would make absolutely sure that my body became a pincushion of bullets, and that I was definitely dead. I imagine he was cursing himself for not doing a better job, and was possibly amazed I had survived the shooting. In truth, no one was more flabbergasted than myself. I am surprised my body pulled through against all the odds. It is remarkably resilient, that's all I can say. I think I was conscious for about 2 minutes after the shooting. Then I completely blacked out and faded into oblivion. I remember nothing after that, other than waking up in a hospital bed, being welcomed back to the world by a doctor who told me it had been touch and go for a while, but a team of skilled surgeons in accident and emergency had successfully brought me back from the very brink of death. I had no near-death experiences to recount, and if I did, they're clouded in amnesia, as I have no recollection of any of it. Unbeknown to the shooter, Jason was staying in my apartment that night, sleeping on the couch, and so his presence in my home saved my life, as I was able to receive the medical attention I needed forthwith. I was a very fortunate man, and was fully aware of this, as if Jason had not been there, I would not have been conscious to call for help, so I would almost certainly have not survived my injuries. The first time I met Eve, I was in an intolerable amount of insufferable pain that was so dreadful it's impossible to describe. It was nothing short of a miracle that I happened to notice the little ambiguous sign sticking out from a tree, where there was a narrow path which read, "The Alaskan Queen." To date I still marvel that I found the place at all. It was so inconspicuously buried behind all those trees. I was expecting Eve to be a heavyweight woman, built like a tank engine, the hardened, robust, well-weathered outdoor type, with short cropped hair and a very masculine physique. But she was as pretty as a picture, and although athletic and strong, she was slight, slender and feminine, which you wouldn't expect from a woman living on her own in the Alaskan wilderness. It was like finding a single flower in a mountainous valley. Eve had fair skin, green eyes, long silky dark hair that fell beyond her shoulders. It was amazing how oblivious she was in regards to her own attractiveness. I like women like that, who have no idea how pretty they actually are. That in itself I find beguilingly attractive. I could tell she wasn't that enamoured to have me inconveniently flung into her charge, as she thoroughly enjoyed living on her own, and she loved the solo lifestyle. My serendipitous arrival in her life like an unwanted parcel was possibly the last thing she wanted. I knew she'd only agreed to be saddled with me, as she was being paid for the privilege, but I wouldn't have had it any other way. It was a major job to look after the likes of me, in my weak, pathetic state. It was so frustrating for an athletic person like myself to be reduced to such a weakling, confined to the couch with about as much energy as a sloth. It didn't help that my medications made me perpetually sleepy. Let's just say, for a man used to living an active lifestyle, being forced to lie back all day and take it easy was a manner of incarceration for me. A hypothetical prison sentence, you could say. But the loveliness of Eve and her warm, engaging personality made it all the more bearable for me. I would say her warm, winsome sense of humour helped me rise above some of the pain that I was experiencing. I could see why Eve loved living in the middle of nowhere, for in the desolate isolation there was so much beauty to be found, an abundance of it, especially in the natural wildlife that often congregated near the cabin in the early mornings and late evenings. I'd seen grizzly bears on her property, wandering around, one with 3 cubs, even looking at us through the window. It would make us laugh. Those bears could be a hell of a noisy, and believe me, you always heard them coming. There'd been moose on the property. One evening a mother grey wolf and her younglings hung around on the patio all evening. We watched her licking her little younglings clean. She was so tender towards them, an amazing attentive mother. We watched the little cubs playing with each other, and although they could see us watching them, they were unfazed, undaunted. There were lots of visitors to Eve's property that were so comfortable with her cabin, as they were to the surrounding landscape, almost as if it was just another tree. Eve would stand in the living room painting pictures from photographs she'd taken in nature on an easel. She would recreate her impression of the photograph on the canvas, which she would later sell to a gallery in Anchorage for the benefits of tourists visiting the area, delighting in taking a piece of Alaska back home with them. I must admit her artwork was inspirational. I loved watching her paint. She made it look so terribly easy, and she was a naturally neat painter, which was why she could paint in her living room without splattering paint on her furniture. I had begun to thoroughly enjoy being in her company, and I was beginning to develop feelings for her, which was not what I was expecting to happen. I hasten to say that the discerning Jason predicted as much.
I wouldn't mind betting you'll fall head over heels in love with my stepsister, Dustin. You know, the injured soldier falling for the nurse? It happens all the time. Make sure I'm best man at your wedding, will you?
I thought he'd been joking. Now, I wasn't so sure. Had he intentionally been playing matchmaker with us and cunningly brought us together? In truth, I was beginning to see that we had so much in common and could already envisage a life with Eve. Or more to the point, I couldn't imagine a life without her in it. It would be like a monochromatic painting without any colour. Something big would be missing from my life. Let's just say it is not easy to find love in Alaska. Believe me, I know. For so long I'd been struggling to find the right woman, and now I'd met my ideal match, under the roof of a remote cabin, in the middle of nowhere. This was not the place I would have expected to find love. But that's love for you, isn't it? Its seed germinates when you least expect it to. The trouble was, Eve gave me the distinct impression that she wasn't interested in a relationship of any kind, and I wasn't even sure if she actually liked me in that way. As if she liked me, surely she'd give me a signal in this regard. I didn't want to tell her how I felt, as I didn't want to lose the friendship we had formed together. It was too precious for me for that. I decided that if anything were to happen between us, I'd leave the ball entirely in her court. It was easier that way, rather than making a complete fool of myself and blowing up our friendship. My long road to recovery was a tumultuous journey, like driving your truck down the most hazardous road that leaves you wondering if you're going to make it through alive, with all those potholes, sheer crevices, black ice. So no, it wasn't easy. I'd gone through nauseous bouts of terrible pain that were so gruesome I was sometimes forced to throw up the contents of my stomach. A weird parallel, I know, but our bodies are enigmatic, to say the least. But slowly and surely, I was gradually getting stronger and stronger. I was beginning to exercise around the house, but had not ventured outdoors yet. I think I had a misguided, warped perception that I was stronger than I actually was. One day when Eve went shopping into Anchorage for supplies with the ever-faithful Ernest by her side, who always accompanied her on her road trips, it was only me and Muffin in the house, and by the looks of Muffin, he wasn't exactly going to be the most riveting company for me. The lackadaisical grey and white cat had sagaciously retreated onto the couch, parking himself under the window pane for the entire afternoon. As bright shafts of warm sunlight filtered onto the couch, Muffin greedily snatched and hoovered up the sunshine all to himself, snuggling in the warm spot. I didn't know the meaning of laziness until I met Muffin, but to be fair, when he received a visit from those bald eagles, he bounced out of his lethargy and would behave like a playful kitten towards the two magnificent birds of prey, with a wingspan of 7.5 feet, and I'm not kidding either. Muffin looks at me through half-shut eyes, and I know he'll be drifting off to La La Land very, very soon. It was such an intriguingly beautiful summer's day, and Alaska in summer is magnificent, and the prepossessing views around the cabin were totally enchanting. I suddenly felt this overwhelming desire to get out there, as being cooped up indoors like a bird in a cage meant I was hankering to get out into the fresh air, and my spirit had become restless as I waited impatiently for my body to heal. The trouble was my body didn't accommodate my disquiet, and was stubbornly hell-bent on healing at its own very slow pace. I was feeling much stronger, eating better. I'd even put on some weight, which was a good thing, as over the past few weeks I had lost about 58 pounds, and my clothes had been hanging off me like a large tent. Eve had assured me that my skin was no longer grey, like it had been when I first arrived on her property. "I never knew I'd make such a good nurse," she joked, "but look at you. Your skin is glowing. When you first moved in, you were so grey. It's being in such an idyllic environment, watching all the fabulous sunsets in the evening from the porch, or the animals visiting the meadow. It's doing you the world of good. Nature is the best healer, you know. There are moments you look so washed out, so peaky, so pallid, that I did wonder then whether I'd wake up one morning to find you dead." "You didn't," I gasped. "Yes, I did. You had your moments, you know," she admits. "Moments when you look pretty grim, but you're looking great. Now you must take it easy.
A few steps at a time. Don't you dare overdo it. You're not as strong as you look, you know. Appearances can be deceptive. Just because you think you're better doesn't actually mean you are. I remember when I was a kid, I recovered from a bout of pneumonia. I insisted I was better and arrived at school excited to be back with all my friends again. But within 20 minutes, I had fainted and collapsed. I was so weak. I had underestimated my strength, lied to my parents by how well I actually was. Be careful not to let that happen to you. I can see you're champing at the bit to get out into nature, but you need to take it one step at a time. I knew that I'd only ever attempt going out of doors to explore when Eve was safely out of the way. So I waited for the perfect opportunity when she left for Anchorage that morning for her monthly shop. I knew if Eve was here, she would stop me from taking a walk outside. She would insist that I wasn't fit enough. I felt sure I could manage a walk. I was feeling great. It was a beautiful, tranquil day, kissed by a nostalgic serenity. The long summer days in Alaska can be dreamily romantic, with temperatures warm and pleasant, sometimes reaching 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So armed with a rifle, I left the whimsical wooden cabin behind me that was made out of ancient wooden beams. I ambled towards the large, welcoming congregation of quaking aspen, yellow polar and spruce trees that were rustling their velvety green boughs mischievously in a gentle, cool breeze. In the furthest distance, basking under the horizon, like a couple of towering but enormous hunchbacked whales, were the billowing, poised silhouettes of the mountains, gallantly carpeted in a dreamy, bushy glaze of contrasting shades of green. The jutting tips of their rugged contours were magnanimously sprinkled with an icing sugar like snow. The cobalt blue sky was bespeckled with white candy floss clouds, while birds with outstretched wings soared above me. The field surrounding the cabin on every side was filled with knee-high grass and thousands of bright pink flowers that littered the landscape with their beguiling bright colours. It felt so marvellously good to be out in nature again, to feel the cool breeze blowing against my face and the warm sun beating down upon my shoulders. I soaked happily in its warmth. The grass tickled my knees as I ambled towards the trees. Before long I was walking happily through the woods, where I could see twinkling glimpses of the blue sky, playfully peering at me through the open canopy, like a naughty, mischievous child spying on its parents. It was so pretty in the forest, with the floor carpeted with ferns and rather attractive shade-loving flowers. The forest was peppered in the shade of a soft ethereal light that dappled the viridescent scenery in differing tones of light. I was beginning to heave and breathe heavily. My legs were aching, and I was panting like an unfit dog. Only moments before I was feeling so great, but suddenly my chest was seized with painful, aching spasms that reminded me of when I was first shot. But this was so much worse. The throbbing, insufferable pain surged through my bloodstream like a hostile, uninvited intruder, and began to shoot through me like shooting stars going off in the heavens all at once. I felt as if I was going to lose my balance and keel over, so I quickly reached out towards a tree to steady myself, to balance myself up against it. I'm so overwhelmed by exhaustion. I feel out of breath, dizzy, disorientated. So I sink to the ground, clutching my chest tightly. I grimace in pain. My body shuddering under its lamentable, objectionable offence. I'm not sure exactly what happened after that. Maybe I passed out from the punishing pain. I don't know. But a while later I'm feeling something poking me. I know it's Eve, trying to wake me up in the cabin, having returned from Anchorage from doing her shopping. I know she means well, but my golly, I want to continue sleeping. I don't want to wake up. Can't a man be left to sleep in peace, for goodness sake? I keep my eyes tightly closed, clutching on to sleep for dear life, like a reluctant child who begrudgingly won't let go of its filthy teddy bear that his mother wants to wash for him. The nudging continues. I groan. Eve, I'm not hungry. Leave me alone, I mumble. But my words don't exactly come out like that. I sound like I'm groaning. Ah! I open my eyes to see two creatures standing over me, with very concerned, bewildered looks on their faces. I close my eyes tightly again. The poking continues. This time I open my eyes fully. I find myself staring into these bright brown eyes, inches away from my own. At first I'm convinced that this is a rather bizarre dream I'm having. This can't be happening to me. Where am I? And more to the point, what is this strange thing staring at me that looks so remarkably human? I rise up out of my slumber and sit up with a start, trying to take everything in, trying to literally become acclimatized to my bearings. I'm in the forest, sitting under a tree, with two idiosyncratic creatures squatting on their hefty legs to get down to my level, with one hand on my leg. The other has a hand on the back of my forehead, as if trying to gauge my temperature. Both the creatures are wearing profound, assiduous expressions on their faces that portray a level of steadfast concern. They are worried about me. It's in this moment I realise what they are. They're Bigfoots. I knew these creatures existed because a good friend of mine was fishing on a boat in an Alaskan lake once with a few of his mates. He claimed he had the strange sense that he was being watched. Everyone on that boat felt it, and that was when they witnessed this tall creature of about 8 foot tall, covered in hair with a human-like face, staring at them. The creature was benevolent, non-aggressive, but stared at them, and they swore that in front of their eyes he vanished like a ghost. It was the weirdest thing that had ever happened to my friend. In the end, everyone concluded he must have slipped into a portal or something. I had been envious of my friend's encounter, but now I'm close up and personal myself with two Bigfoots that are obviously trying to help me out, and I don't exactly know how to react. I mean, how do you react when something so outlandish happens to you like this? How would you feel if a Tyrannosaurus Rex is sniffing in your face and you wake up to this? I study the creatures rather curiously, especially the one that has risen up on his feet, while one remains squatted on her legs, looking at me intently. She's talking to the other creature in a language I don't understand. I know they're discussing me. Omo inata abo omalasin. Oh, mina, omilo biana lamanomina. The Bigfoot that is standing up is all male. I'd say he's about 9 foot tall, easily over 800 pounds, possibly more. He's built like a robust army tank with a muscular brawn that is downright impressive. He'd probably make the strongest man in the world look like a puny wimp, as he's easily the equivalent of 5 strong men put together in just one body. I noticed that there were very little primate influences to his appearance, with the exception of the long flowing dark hair that covered their bodies, the pyramid-shaped heads and overlong arms, but other than that, they were incredibly human. They didn't smell foul either. There was no ugly smells around them, or a demoniacal look in their faces. On the contrary, both creatures were ruggedly good-looking, with high cheekbones, deep-set eyes the colour of Eva's golden retriever dog, and very square jawlines. The female Bigfoot is the one that seems to be mothering me. She's stroking my face so tenderly. She reaches out a large hand to mine, and I stagger to my feet as I take hers in mine. I realise the creatures are going to help me get back safely to the cabin, and I'm so grateful, because without their help, I'm not going to make it on my own. The pain is excruciating. My legs are buckling beneath my feet. I hold on to the Bigfoot for dear life, terrified of losing my balance. The two creatures engage in conversation together. Omaki alaka iupo, amano dukone na ba. Minabo, imama shomako, omo. And once they've reached a decision, the female Bigfoot carries me in her arms, and both creatures deliver me to my porch. Well, rather Eva's porch, and the female places me on the chair there. Thank you very much, I say. They nod at me very graciously, and then I watch them glide away, and they move like the wind, almost as if they're floating. I knew Eve was back before I even saw the truck, as I could hear Ernest barking excitedly. I'm quite certain he'd seen the Bigfoots himself. Eve opens the door to the patio, and he comes tearing out, sniffing me all over, wagging his tail excitedly. He can definitely smell the Bigfoots on me. Where the hell have you been? I've been looking for you everywhere. I didn't know where you'd got to. I couldn't find you anywhere in the cabin. You seem to have disappeared into thin air. To my amazement, I could see tears in Eve's eyes. I was worried sick about you. I thought something dreadful had happened. I thought...
You thought what? I asked her gently.
I thought that evil man had finally found you, had taken you away and...
The next thing I know, Eve is sobbing. I'm holding her in my arms, kissing the top of her head gently.
I'm all right, Eve. I had a bit of adventure, that's all. But you're right. I wasn't fit enough to go exploring, so I slipped up.
You mean you went out after I left Anchorage all on your own, without my help? How could you do that? Are you crazy? I nodded. You are crazy then. I told you that you needed to be careful, but I should have guessed you wouldn't listen to me. You can be quite stubborn when you want to be.
Would you believe it? I collapsed when I got into the wood grove.
You went all the way into the woods, says Eve, looking aghast, wiping away the tears from her face. Are you kidding me? Do you realise how treacherous it is in the wood grove, all those jutting rocks, the precipitous terrain? What on earth were you thinking? You know you're not fit.
I wasn't thinking. I collapsed. I think I fell asleep there.
You're joking, are you?
No, I'm not. I was awoken by 2 benevolent Bigfoot with very kind eyes. They were very good to me. They brought me back to the cabin. I couldn't have made it back on my own.
2 Bigfoots, says Eve, looking stunned. You know it's a funny thing, but I always felt I was being looked after out here in the wilderness, as if someone had my back. And I think I know who they are now. You know, Bigfoot aren't just known as the king of the forest for nothing. But I feel jealous you had such a one-on-one encounter with them. But I'm so relieved you're all right. In that moment, I knew Eve cared for me. She was genuinely upset that some harm may have happened to me. So the words came tumbling out like bullets from a revolver. I pressed the trigger, and it was too late. I'd said it.
Eve, I'm in love with you. I think I've had feelings from you from the moment I ate your potato gnocchi that you dished up.
She stares at me for a moment, her eyes widening. Then a tear spills down her cheek.
Oh God, I think I haven't blown it.
I told you that potato gnocchi was legendary. Didn't I tell you that?
You're not kidding. There must be a love potion attached to it. It's a hell of a dangerous potato gnocchi, if you ask me, for an unsuspecting man.
Eve laughs. I think so too. When I thought something had happened to you, I thought my insides had been ripped apart. The idea of being without you suddenly seemed nonsensical. It's like you've grown on me. At first you were an annoying inconvenience that benefited my bank account favourably. And now you're an inconvenience I don't actually want to be without. I think even Ernest and Muffin would agree with me there. Ernest lets out a couple of approving woofs, as if in absolute agreement.
Woof, woof, woof.
I then get down on my knees. I pull out a ring pull from the can of beer I'd opened, and I put it on Eve's finger.
Eve, will you marry me?
Yes, 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 I will, she cries out in delight. To cut a long story short, Eve and I finally tied the knot. I did replace the ring pull from the beer for a rather attractive ring that Eve selected in Anchorage for herself. I'm pleased to say that Eve's brother, or stepbrother if you like, Jason, was the best man at our wedding, while Ernest wore a black tie for the ceremony, and Muffin insisted on remaining at home, having found another warm spot on the couch that had grabbed his attention. The relationship with Eve's stepbrother grew in leaps and bounds, and they now unequivocally consider each other brother and sister, and it's common for Jason to spend weekends with us. I am now living in the remote country cabin with Eve. I love it here, although sometimes my work does take me away from her, for weeks at a time, but that is never a problem for us. We have found each other, and that is all that really matters. I'm glad to say the man who tried to kill me was caught and incarcerated, so now he's safely behind bars. After Eve and I had our first baby, a little girl we chose to call Seraphina, as the name has angelic connotations, so it seemed appropriate. When we brought Seraphina back from the hospital, we found the table on our outside patio, filled with gifts, a couple of really magnificent river stones, the likes of such I've never seen before, a bird's nest with a little egg inside it, a petrified piece of driftwood that is a spectacular piece on our coffee table, and a couple of freshly caught fish.
Let's just say we knew at once they were gifts from the Bigfoot, congratulating us on our new addition to the family. So we know they're watching out for us. So there you are. That's my story.
Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.